welcome to the inaugural episode of Comic Breakers, where we break down and discuss all of the latest and greatest in comic book movies and television.
And then we decide where they're going to go definitively, story-wise. We break the stories. It's Comic Breakers. Wild Speculation Central is what this place is.
We're cracking down on these stories with our sledgehammer of knowledge.
We're beating them up. We're ruining them. That's what we're going to do on this podcast.
My name is Nolan Vinoy. I'm a filmmaker, a writer, a musician from North Carolina.
I'm Brian Stork. Let's just say I'm all those things as well, except the music one.
And so what are we doing for our big inaugural week, Brian?
Well, there's not really a lot happening in comic book news actually right now, so I figured we'd just kind of talk about our hopes and dreams, and I actually brought just a list of really kind of in-depth topics that I wanted to talk about just the universe and personalities and just kind of, So my first thing here, we're talking about WandaVision. We're talking about WandaVision, obviously. Okay, so I have literally just before recording finished watching the last episode of WandaVision.
I'm interested to see how our opinions and our thoughts are gonna differ based on the fact that I watched it this morning and then I did a quick little rewatch that I wasn't paying a lot of attention. The clock ticked from midnight. The clock ticked from midnight to 12:01, and you had already watched it somehow. That is false. That is false. I actually was. I live on the East Coast, and so the episode goes live at 3 a.m. and I was awake at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But I did not watch it. I waited.
You definitely did think about it, though.
I did think about it. But I was like, no, I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait until the morning, like a normal person.
Right. Like a normal person watching WandaVision at 7 in the morning.
All right, I'm sorry. I just wanted to start my Friday off on a good note.
That's fair. And it was a very good note. Okay, we're going to start with non-spoilers, right? Just talking about the show in general. Was it good? Was it not? Are you somehow watching this podcast without having already watched WandaVision?
Right. I don't think... Is there a single person on the internet right now that is like, I better go check out YouTube to find out if I should watch this whole WandaVision thing?
I better find the least viewed podcast first episode to decide whether or not I'm going to watch the entirety of WandaVision. I think that's proof. I think that's proof that our opinions are weird. I don't get paid by Disney. That's true. So. We don't get paid by anyone. We're nobodies.
Yeah.
That's how you know.
I'm nothing.
I think
you're nothing.
I think it's.
Brian.
I do think it's interesting though. I think this show has had the highest number of people in my life who don't usually watch comic book stuff, like don't watch the Marvel movies and stuff, who have been watching it, which is interesting to me. Mm-hmm. That it seems to have like drawn in a lot of people who didn't watch Infinity War, maybe saw Endgame because everybody saw it,
because everybody saw Endgame.
Yeah.
I feel the same thing, and I think there's maybe a couple of reasons for that. But I think one of those reasons, and perhaps the biggest one, is that while it can be really difficult and infuriating for fans who just want to get all of the story, the way that the show and Disney Plus has decided to release their content is really smart, because it keeps this conversation going for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. And so because everyone is just talking about this stuff, it's going to spread to people that normally wouldn't get their hands on it. So
yeah, I mean, this is the show that like you can't go online if you haven't watched. Like that's a thing. Like every couple of years there's like the show.
Right.
Do you? And this is just we're skipping ahead a little bit here, but do you think that this is like? Are we going to see a second season of specifically WandaVision?
If we do, I do not think it'll be for a long time, and it won't be anything like this. I think maybe someday we'll get another series about Wanda, but it won't be a sequel to WandaVision. I'm highly certain of that. I think this, and I think probably for the most part, what they're doing with these series are basically just taking what they can't do in the movies, what they can't release into theaters, and extending it out and making those movies into TV shows. Like I don't think you can necessarily tell a story about Wanda and Vision that is as personal as this one is. I don't think you can necessarily do that in the movies.
I agree, and I have some thoughts about what a season 2 could look like, but we will wait to talk about that in the Breakers portion. But
Breakers.
for right now, I've decided just now that the two sections are called Comic and Breakers.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
this was not supposed to be the first thing for Marvel Phase 4.
No.
Far From Home was like the little like epilogue to Phase 3, and so originally the first thing for Phase 4 was, I guess Black Widow technically counts, but the first real thing that takes place after Endgame was going to be Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And
really?
so,
these got switched. Okay.
Yeah, these got switched. There was we'll talk about it when we eventually preview Falcon and Winter Soldier, probably next week, but there was a thing with that production where some plot points apparently resembled COVID, and so they went and reshot stuff with that, and they were pretty far along in this.
Zemo wants to do a COVID to everybody.
Zemo wants everyone to not be able to breathe.
Right, because he can't in that big purple mask.
So I have my opinion about this, but what do you think about this being the very first thing that Marvel and Disney have put out to signal this is the future of the MCU moving forward?
I actually think, and it's interesting because one of the things I was going to say about this show going into this, not knowing that information, was that this was an incredibly bold thing to release early in this new phase. But the fact that it was supposed to be third, I think, makes a lot of sense because it is so out there.
Right.
That they wanted to couch it in the two things on this phase's slate that feel the most normal. You know, Black Widow and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Those two things feel the most, out of all this whole upcoming slate, like the most kind of standard, this is what you expect from a Marvel thing. And I think it's actually probably a blessing in disguise that this ended up coming first and doing so incredibly well.
I agree. Yeah.
I think that this is going to encourage them to keep on getting weird.
Yeah. And it really excites me. Like, a lot of Phase 4 is written by people that were in the Rick and Morty writers' room. So that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about moving forward, at least for this phase of Marvel. And so I 100% agree. I think that this actually couldn't have come out at a better time in terms of what Marvel is probably, what they're headed towards in terms of storytelling, but also in terms of what I think the world needs in terms of mass consumed media. I feel like this is the perfect kind of story. Like, it's a story about grief, and everyone is grieving right now. And it's a story that is really beautifully told about grief. And it's extremely accessible, and so
even I mean, God, if you want to take that even further, I know we're putting this on it because it was obviously, generated way before any of this was happening, but the idea of having your family with you but they're not really with you, and that is pretty resonant. It's interesting. Let's talk about the TV framing device. Not something that's generally associated with Wanda or Vision in the comics or anything. What did you think, now that it's over and we have the resolution of it, and we won't go into what the resolution of it is, but how do you feel about that framing device throughout the entire show?
I think that it is brilliant, to be honest with you. I do, because it gives you it gives you a freedom in a story, in a storytelling sense, to do something weird and completely antithetical to everything that you've done with Marvel before. But it gives you this completely different window as well to look at the characters of Wanda and Vision. How do they work? What is their relationship actually sort of built on? What do they really care about on the inside? Because when you strip away Wanda, having to fight Thanos or blow up a, ancient stone that's in her boyfriend's head, like, when you strip away that, who is Wanda? And being able to put it through this sitcom lens of like, oh, they have a dinner party and they've got to figure out how to do that. It gives you such a new way to experience those characters. And so I think it's brilliant. And I think it was also great because in addition to the extended conversation, because this happened over 8 weeks, it was released over 8 weeks,
Yeah.
Going into those genres, especially for the first 2 episodes, and I know a lot of geek culture out there wasn't necessarily into the first 2 episodes. They felt like it was too slow, and they were like, "What the hell is going on?" I was totally bought in.
Yeah, that's insane to me. That
I agree. It's just like just sit. They're telling you a story. Let them do it.
Yeah.
But for me, like, my parents watched this show every single week without fail.
Yeah.
On Friday, texted the family group text, and were like, what's going on with WandaVision? And the reason why is because I showed them the first 2 episodes, and I was like, look at this kind of silly sitcom thing that they're doing with these two Avengers. And they were totally into the conceit of like, oh my gosh, a black and white sitcom. This is so much fun,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
No, I completely agree. I think that they made a decision to go all in on each of these eras of sitcoms. I think that the emotion behind it makes perfect sense. I am also a sucker for going into doing a genre thing, but having something really wrong underlying it. I always love that. It plays very Stanley Parable or Doki Doki Literature Club, or all of those things work so well and also better examples that are probably more well known or whatever, I don't know, but all of those things work so well because you are so familiar with the tropes and you can fall into them so easily that when there's something just a little bit wrong, when there's a camera angle that's a little bit off,
right,
you feel it, and it just draws you completely in.
And it's a technical like filmmaking thing, but it's something that the normal audience feels for sure. But when you switch from a multicam static setup to single camera, the camera's moving in towards someone's face right now, like everybody feels that, and everyone's like, oh, there was just a shift. There was a shift
or even just that shot's a little bit too centered, or like this shot is not the kind of shot that they would quite be able to get like with the 2-camera or 3-camera setup. Like, it's so I don't know. It's amazing.
And I also do want to say I don't think that this on the TV element. I think when I was going into it, I didn't think that they were going to fully commit to it in the way that they did. Like, I thought probably by episode 4 we're going to be in more standard Marvel territory. And they stuck with it. They stuck with it all the way until episode 7 of really digging into. And it goes into the performances too.
Yeah, and it never got less. Like, the attention to detail never got smaller. It's a really funny show, and that's hard enough on its own. But to be so funny in exactly the way that each of these eras of sitcoms is, or isn't, and we'll get into that, but is incredibly impressive. And talking about performances, bringing in all of this talent from sitcoms.
Yeah, Deborah Jo Rupp.
Even just, I think it's so smart that all of the secondary characters that they brought in from other Marvel movies are all the characters whose actors come from sitcoms.
Right, Kat Dennings, Randall Park. Yeah,
exactly. Both, it's all this huge influx of sitcom talent that really just sells this whole thing. There's one of my favorites, the commercial woman who appears, and what was her name? The actor's name?
The actor's name? It's Victoria Blade, I think.
Victoria Blade. Okay, right. She has the look of a sitcom regular actor who you could not place but have seen in everything. You know what I mean? It's across the board.
Oh, you probably had a New Girl show,
Exactly. And even if it's because they're bringing in talent that has been in, dozens of sitcoms, but even when they're not, the casting is so pitch perfect, and it's perfect for crossing eras too. That you go, oh yes, I've absolutely seen that person in a sitcom.
Right, for sure.
Even my YouTube algorithm, every new episode of WandaVision that drops, I get recommended top 10 moments of this actor in Parks and Rec. I'm like, oh yeah,
oh, that's
obviously,
amazing.
Of course.
That's so good.
Okay, let's talk about spoilers. Fuck. Oh my god. Okay.
This show
Okay.
did everything.
So this is still
Like,
very fresh for me. But I was concerned as we approached the last episode of this show that as we kind of solved the mystery and stripped away, the sitcom stuff and it became more Marvel-y, I was worried that it was just going to become a bunch of people shooting multicolored lasers at each other because there were so many lasers going into this that I was ready for. I
right.
was ready for white laser. I was ready for yellow laser. I was ready for
And
red
by
laser,
the,
blue
you know,
laser, purple laser.
by the end of episode 8, I mean, while you do have this like really thorough feeling for every single one of the characters, you are basically like, all right, we've got Monica Rambeau, Spectrum, we have Wanda, we have Agatha Harkness, we have White Vision, we have Spectral Vision. Got to get
Right.
that right. Spectral Vision. We have our Hex Vision. Lots of lasers. We also
So
have
many lasers.
We also have Fietro, fake Quicksilver as well. Didn't know if he was gonna get involved.
His resolution is hilarious to me because of how unimportant he is.
Right. I think the boner joke wasn't necessarily all that funny to me, but some people have been like deeply offended by that, and I don't get
because
that.
he's not because that's all he is.
Because he's just Ralph Boner. He's nothing
I
else.
think
He's
the boner joke on its own is not especially funny to me, but the fact that it's coming at the end of 8 weeks of like deep speculation,
yeah, right,
and it's
right.
like, oh, he's just some dude, some struggling actor, and his name is Boner. It's like,
and half of that time we were like, how the fuck is Evan Peters in this show?
yeah, no, half the time we were like, is he crossed over from the X-Men universe? Is that the true Quicksilver from Fox Universe who's coming to like save Wanda? And it's like, no, it's just a dude named Boner.
And
I just find that
and
really
I
funny.
gotta say, I'm so thankful that it's not that. That it is not we're gonna yank over sort of pick and choose which Fox cast members we want, and we're going to bring them over into the MCU.
I mean, they're still going to probably do that with Deadpool, but outside of that.
Right. And I wonder how that's going to look. That's a whole other discussion. But
I have thoughts, but that's probably for another episode.
I feel like this show just does it sets out with a goal of we're going to deal with Wanda, who has basically only experienced bad
Yeah,
events
her
in
arc
life.
is entirely loss. Like
Right.
every time she appears, she loses something.
I also think that I wonder if pre Endgame, pre Infinity War, I wonder if that was just at that point in time that was just the Scarlet Witch. That was just what Scarlet Witch was gonna be in the MCU, And
Yeah.
it was we kind of skirt by the chaos magic thing, skirt by the fact that she's a Nexus being.
Right.
But they were able to use this idea that she has basically only experienced loss to introduce the fact that she is a like multiverse level threat that is like basically all important in Marvel Comics.
It's another example I feel of like the incredible benefit of a universe like this that's built well, where you can have this character who's never the main character of a movie and is always getting kicked around but not as like the centerpiece of the story, and then you can give that character their own story to be like, hey, hold on, isn't it super fucked up that this is all that's been happening to them, and like how is that affecting them psychologically? Like
Right.
you can't do that with any other format except comics, which is, I just think it's so cool that like that's actually that they've gone fully into that.
Kevin Smith said something that I think is really fascinating, and I think is just very true of how Disney and Marvel have basically kind of figured this out, is that it feels like reading comics,
Absolutely,
in terms of like having a movie coming out every once in a while, having an episode of a show coming out basically every week with like 2-week gaps. I mean, for the foreseeable future, it's going to be like this. And I think there's this great subtextual thing. This is another thing that Kevin Smith said that I thought was really amazing, is like the comics, now Marvel is sort of expanding on story that has been told in the past. You know, with the 8th episode, we figure out that, oh, Wanda's always actually had some magical ability, you
Which
know?
is such a smart retcon to the point that
Right.
it almost feels like that was talked about. I know it probably wasn't talked about at the time, but like just the fact that that bomb never went off because she was preventing it from going off is so smart.
Right. It's one of those little plot points if like there was, there's 80 billion things happening in Avengers Age of Ultron, but if you were to stop for a moment and be like, "Wait a minute. You're saying a bomb crashed through your ceiling and it never went off?" Like,
Incredibly unlikely, yeah. And
right.
I think there's a lot of incredibly smart retcons in this show. I think another one is, and it's not really a retcon, but going back and looking at Wanda and Vision's relationship in the past, and like that great scene with the two of them in her room at the Avengers compound, and just making it feel like we've been here for so long, you know?
Yeah.
When did Age of Ultron come out? What year was that? Was that
It's 2015. Yeah.
2015? Yeah. I mean, we've been with these characters for 5-6 years.
And if you can, I mean, if you think about with Paul Bettany, I mean, you're actually talking
Oh
about
God, yeah,
since 2008.
2008.
So we've been with a version of Vision for, let's see, 13 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is so specific, but that one line where he's like, "I've been a voice without a face," and
yes.
it's great. His last line before he evaporates. And I did want to mention, just so that I don't forget, when I said earlier, committing to the different ways that every era of sitcoms are funny. Like I was genuinely laughing at each of these episodes and their specific sitcom style because they nail it so well. I think that I really like that they committed to the fact that 80s sitcoms aren't funny.
Yeah.
Like
they committed to the fact that they're not funny and that they're also just like super saccharine and hyper emotional,
And like that music comes in every 5 seconds. That's like come on, kids, let's have a talk about.
And the opening credits and the theme song for the 80s episode, I think is like,
so
to me,
good.
is actually peak WandaVision humor because it is
11 minute long intro.
Right.
It
It's
just
so
keeps going.
it's so long and it's so like, oh, they're in love and they have these beautiful children. Isn't this amazing? Ain't life grand? The Vision babies. Yeah.
But I think I think each era gets to be disconcerting in a different way because the conventions are just a little bit different. I think it was also interesting. Like I think this season of TV could be taught in like a writing for television course as just like a crash course in every era of comedy television. Because
Right.
something that I saw that I hadn't really thought about before was that like we all know about the laugh track and that's a stand-in for a joke a lot of the time and it's telling you when to laugh. I think it's interesting watching through it that there's always something that is that. There's when the laugh track gets phased out in like the late 90s, early 2000s, it becomes a guitar riff.
Yeah. Like there's these weird like musical cues in the Halloween episode. Yeah.
And then in like the Modern Family era and the Office era, obviously it becomes the gym look. And I don't know. I there's so much love for like the minutia of these eras here.
I also think that all of the sitcom episodes are genuinely good sitcoms in their own right.
Yeah, you would watch another episode of any of these except the 80s one.
Yeah, right. But that's intentional. Like, they made it so, like, gosh, this thing isn't fucking funny. Like,
Though, you know what? I would probably watch the 80s one again just for Agatha being just
for 80s Agatha?
Drunk sitting on the... Like, to be fair, like, one of the funniest moments in the show for me is when the kids age themselves up from babies for the first time, and it just cuts to Agnes, like, sitting in, like, the windowsill, like, with a drink in her hand, like, kids, can't control them.
No matter how hard you try.
It's just, like, with this worldly, like...
Which, like, that's on Catherine Hahn in terms of, like, she clearly has... I mean, in all the actors clearly, like, did so much research and took so much time to feel out what's the comedic timing of this era, what are the accents. I mean, like, Elizabeth Olsen is doing so much accent work this entire
my favorite thing about, well, I have a lot of favorite things about Elizabeth Olsen's performance here, but one of my favorite things is that when she's doing the progressive sitcom accents of the decades, which changes pretty significantly over time,
For sure.
every time she's doing it, she's not just doing that voice. She's doing a person with a naturally Eastern European accent doing that voice.
Right. Yeah. It's like it's a layered thing.
Yeah, you can hear it just a little bit, and I don't know. It's amazing to me.
She's brilliant. She really is brilliant. And Paul Bettany as well. Like I never knew how funny Paul Bettany is.
He's so funny. They both are, but Paul Bettany is I mean, well, because he's drawing on that, like, history of British romantic comedy.
Right. He's got some, like, Hugh Grant-isms in there.
Yeah, he's got some very strong Hugh Grant-isms. But, like, the sing-along in the first episode.
That exact moment when I watched that, I was like, oh, this is genuinely going to be really funny. I think it's going to be really funny
and, like, I mean, the
through.
running thing still in that first episode where he's like, what is it that we do here at this business?
Yeah,
like, what?
Yeah.
So we take in numbers and do.
So what exactly is what exactly is the purpose of the forms? Well, they analyze our input and our output. Huh?
Right. You're pretty dense, aren't you?
You're awfully dense, aren't you, Vision? I love the way that they use, like, the 50s, the 60s, all of those eras, but they still play on the fact of what Vision's power set is and what Wanda's power set is. Like, Wanda saying "my husband" and his indestructible head,
And every iteration of their powers too, like choosing to have their powers manifest the way that the effects would be in that era. So in the 50s, it's reversing footage and having the actors hold very still and then putting something on their hand. And then,
changing
it
their
develops.
outfits, yeah.
Yeah, and then it develops into, like, using smoke, and it develops into, like, using animated effect, like, animation, but also being very clear on when they're really using their powers, and then it's the normal effect. Like, when Vision, in the first episode, when Vision saves him from the guy from choking, and they do that effect normally because we're outside of the show.
Right.
At that, and I don't know, it's so cool.
That moment specifically doesn't do it, but they also use aspect ratio changes and all that kind of stuff to signify those moments as well. And I think it's really well done.
I think that first aspect ratio change is gonna, like, that's a huge, like, capital M
when it pulls out it pulls out to Darcy.
Yeah.
And in the first episode,
and also, I mean,
for sure, I
think there are two that really hit hard, and it's that one where you're like, oh, what the fuck, and the one when Monica gets blown through the fourth wall.
Yep.
And then we're outside, and all of the helicopters and the trucks come in, and it's all Wanda. And
the end of episode 4 does a ton of aspect ratio shifts in a very short span of time. And a lot of times I don't really feel like you actually really register it consciously, but you do. You feel it a lot of the times, and you're like, oh, I'm watching a sitcom again,
And speaking of, like, manipulating the format, having multiple times in the previous Leons the characters say different lines from what they actually said.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's also great. It even happens in the last episode. There's a line that's different.
Did you notice that every previously on WandaVision that Elizabeth Olsen gets sadder with each individual one? Yeah.
No, I didn't notice that.
She gets less enthusiastic every single time. It's really cool.
That's so great.
Yeah. So let's talk on a comic book level in terms of like what is this pulling from when it started, where we expecting things to go. I certainly had different ideas of what this was going to be about at the beginning of it. But so tell me what were your thoughts when you came out of the first 2 episodes when it first came out?
I think my initial thought was that this wasn't going to. It was clear, kind of, some of the things that it was pulling from. It was pulling from Tom King's Vision run. It was pulling from House of M. Obviously, I would say those are probably the big two. that it's pulling from.
I'd also add West Coast Avengers, the Vision Quest stuff.
Okay, yeah. I'm not as familiar with that. But give me a quick rundown on that.
That is, it's basically the original story of Tommy and Billy Maximoff and those being shards of Mephisto's soul, and then they get reincarnated, and then Vision turns into white.
The panel with them getting slurped into his hands or whatever.
Right. Well, that's actually that's Master Pandemonium. That's his hands are two. Are both. It's fucking weird.
My heart bleeds for the people who thought that the Quicksilver guy was going to be Master Pandemonium.
Well,
Someday.
There was like at the end of the 8th episode, like people were like, "Oh my gosh, she's holding the boys like marionette things. It's like Master Pandemonium. Oh my gosh." And it's not that. It's the sly reference, if anything. Also, that was the first time that Spectral Vision became a thing. It was where he basically Vision comes back and he's all white and he has all of his memories, but then he's like, "I'm not your husband and I'm not your father." He's totally emotionless. So
it's I think since we just kind of stumbled into the whole Vision conversation. And talking about comics too, this might be like, and you actually before I watched this episode, you were like, I'm not going to tell you what I'm talking about or anything specific, but there's a Vision scene in this episode that is the best Vision thing that's ever been done
in comics and movies and anything.
And it's obviously the Theseus, the ship of Theseus scene, and it's as far as single Vision moments go, it's incredible. It's two Visions working out who they are together, and then unlocking the memories. And they're working out who they are in the most Vision way possible. Yeah. I think throughout, starting with Age of Ultron, if we're talking about pure Vision. Vision has always had like the best dialogue for being like a never a main plot character, but he has his scene with Ultron at the end of Age of Ultron is great. It's one of my favorite MCU scenes.
Well, I was born yesterday.
Yeah, and that there is beauty in their failures and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And what is grief if not love persevering? Capping it off with two things, with the ship of Theseus conversation and his final moments with Wanda. Imagine what I'll be next, and yeah.
Right. That whole, and I caught it a little clearer on the second watch through, but the way he sort of reasons out, he says, "We've said goodbye before," and the way that she responds of just, and perhaps that means we'll say hello again, is just like the most beautiful way for those two to end, to come to the conclusion there.
Even just specifically the way of saying like it stands to reason. It's such a mixture of hope and but not letting go of who Vision is, like how his mind works. And I think that's maybe the most impressive thing with this show is getting to do all of these things that are, cool, that are really fun and interesting and exciting, but having all of it be centered on characters that are never betrayed in favor of doing something cool. It's all very, very character focused, and I think that's why it works. Like I think if they didn't nail who Wanda and the Vision are, everything else crumbles around it.
Right.
And I think that is important because House of M is very different from this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And one very important difference with House of M is that it's a story that is more about mental illness. Like Wanda is,
and this is not about that.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
In House of M, Wanda is basically losing her mind, and she is very purposefully doing things that are hurting her friends. She's consumed by wanting to get her children back. She's becoming like a nuclear weapon of mental illness. And I think it's really smart that they both, with this show, didn't make her crazy. Like didn't go the route of, oh, she's just been driven insane.
Which is like something that happens in Wanda focused stories in the comics all the time is like, oh, she's
Yeah.
just a wild card. She's got a screw loose, and I'm
Yeah,
so glad that they're not going that way in the films.
yeah, they didn't make her insane, and they also didn't let her have deniability. They didn't give her a cop out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think when I think it's episode 6. Yeah, like when that dropped, and like Agatha all along, a banger. But
so good.
I was concerned that it was kind of meaning that maybe Agatha manipulated Wanda into doing this, or
right.
pulled strings, and maybe she is the person who's doing the mind control part or whatever. I think it's so much better that Wanda did this entirely on her own.
Mm-hmm.
It's her fault, and the townspeople are terrified of her at the end. Part of me thought she was going to get arrested at the end of this.
Right. I was wondering if she was, for a moment, I was like, is she just going to wait for these cops to arrest her?
Because, I mean, she should be arrested,
right.
I would say.
Yeah.
She did kidnap an entire town of her own volition for who knows how long that
how much
was.
she realizes what she really did, what they were experiencing, who's to say? But
yeah,
she still did it,
and I think it's smart that she, but they also didn't make her a full-on villain. They gave her enough deniability that she thought that they were at peace, or she made herself think that they were peaceful, that their lives were better. Obviously, she's smarter than that, and she was deluding herself. But I think it was really smart to have her both not be insane and also be entirely responsible for this.
I think she comes out the other side of this. I still view her as a hero. And I think you always will view Wanda as a hero in pretty much most stories. What I think also is that in the comics, you could have this exact story. But they would tell the motivation as Wanda's just severely mentally ill and wants these things. But you don't get it's not necessarily as human as she's grieving over these insufferable losses, which is an incredibly human thing,
Well, because that's the thing. Because I think you can do a really interesting story about having incredible powers and also having mental illness. I think Legion is a good example of that.
Yeah, Legion.
But there you go. But I think the important thing is that you can't just say they've had so much bad stuff happen to them that they're crazy now. I think that's not interesting. I think you have to be like, they've had so much horrible stuff happen to them that the logical response is to explode. And what happens after that, and how do they try to delude themselves, and how do the cracks form? Who's trying to kill her for it? Who's trying to help her?
Right.
I'm also glad that Hayward didn't turn out to be a lizard man or Dormammu or Mephisto.
I'm glad that at the end of the day, he's just a dick that had, like, to some extent, like, he had, like, an honorable, like, I want the world to be safe is kind of what he wanted. That was his total end game.
Sort of.
He's just kind of an idiot, and he's a jerk, and definitely not very empathetic.
He also does kind of, and I'm working through this live because, again, I just watched this, but he does kind of just...
He does just randomly decide to shoot the kids also. That's another thing he does.
He decides to shoot the kids, which I get from his perspective, that, like, if he's an idiot and an asshole and he sees, like, fake magic kids or whatever, he'll probably just try to shoot them. But I do think that it's kind of weird that he just gives up his entire evil plan to Jimmy Woo. Is he gonna kill him? Like, what?
What was his plan with that? Yeah.
Was he gonna kill Agent Woo? And, like, I think the more you think about that, it's a little weird.
I think probably that's the show's weak spot is, like, the character. And Josh Stamberg plays the character very, very well because he's deliciously unlikable. But I do think that is, like, the least emotionally effective stuff. Is the stuff that's dealing with Sword. That's not Monica,
Yeah, and because I think it's his plan's a little bit loose, a little bit weird. Like, I get him manipulating the situation so that he can keep Vision, and I'm not 100% sold on why. I guess he was just such an idiot that he directed Wanda to become a nuclear weapon, basically, without realizing it, because it did seem like he was directing her on purpose.
It does, and it does, and it almost seems like his like fuck. He's like, oh damn, I really screwed the pooch on this one. I guess I'll just send my vision in there to kill that vision, assuming that vision can't leave this place. He's just like, it's not very tight.
Yeah,
his plan is not tight at all.
Then I'll have my vision maybe incinerate this FBI agent,
Right.
and also Kat Dennings maybe.
What I really love about Spectral Vision is that the second they set him loose, like, he starts out as kind of like a Terminator, but within minutes, he clearly starts to have a mind of his own and is not thinking on the same page as Sword, which is awesome.
Because he's still Vision, and he's still his mind works a certain way, and and I think that's great. I think it takes him like 4 minutes to get talked down for murder, but I also think it's interesting that you get kind of he's now experienced that twice, where he's been created to be a murderer, and then within like 3 seconds of coming online being like, I'm actually pretty chill. Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I think I'm actually Paul Bettany.
I think I'm actually actor Paul Bettany.
I think I am the man himself, Sir Paul Bettany. But there is I think the energy that Hayward has is pretty comparable to like a bully in an 80s movie who's just a dick,
I see that.
and he makes bad decisions, and he's a dick for the whole movie, and then in like the last 10 minutes he resorts to full-on murder. Like he's just like, he's totally fine with running you over or like shooting somebody. That's what he feels like to me, and I can accept that.
First he whips out the gun like, I'm gonna kill these kids, and then he's like, okay, the gun thing failed, I guess I'll just run them over.
Like, I'm going to run over these kids because I can't think of anything else to do. I also love the kids in this. They don't get a huge amount of screen time just because they have to come in a little bit later. But I think they're great. I think that the Incredibles moments during the fight are fantastic. There's literally the Incredibles shot. There is the direct Incredibles shot of all of them standing together with like their hands out, like being surrounded by military guys and stuff.
And literally that moment, Wanda like puts up a force field like Violet and the Incredibles would do.
It's literally cool. The same. I love it. I love it a lot. And I think just speaking about that kind of moment, I think it's really cool that even though this show plays like it's, well, I don't know, maybe everybody came into it thinking it would be a 90% about Wanda because she's the quote unquote real one or whatever, or like the one who's behind everything. I think it's really cool that by the end of it, you have a villain, quote unquote, for Vision. You have a villain for Wanda, and then you have the like military that's for both of them. I think that this show is a lot more evenly divided between them than you would think going into it, or even watching it week to week.
My only, thinking about the finale. Well, actually, before we talk about that, let's go back. I had a question. When this sort of started out, I felt like I had a very clear idea of like, oh, this is the sort of comic references that they're going to pull from. This is what this is going to be about. For me, I was certain, and I think it was episode 2, having the whole for the children thing, and I wonder how much of it was intentional misdirect. But I was certain that this was going to be about, and I'm still on the eventually I'm on the HMS Mephisto. I'm certain that this is coming around at some point. He wasn't in the show.
The huge Mephisto ship.
Yes, it was doomed. There was not enough lifeboats on the Mephisto ship. But I was certain that this was going to be about someone manipulating Wanda into having children so they could take said children and, do X, Y, or Z with them. I'm so glad it's not. I do think that we're going to get sort of tastes of that moving forward. We'll talk about that when we get into speculation. But that was like my initial idea of like, here's what this is going to be. And I was on that train, I think probably all the way up until episode 6, of feeling like that was the general idea. But yeah, what were you thinking about? Where is this headed at the start of it?
I thought that Agatha wanted the kids aged up. I didn't think that she had anything to do with the creation of the hex. I was pretty sure that they were gonna have it be Wanda because that's just so much more interesting.
Right.
But I did think that Agatha was like intentionally aging up the kids in order to try to like use them or drain their powers or whatever. I think this is the best version of it. I think like the whole conversation she has with Wanda at the start of the flashback episode is really cool. It's awesome when as we're starting to see her introduce like actual magic to Wanda.
Right.
And it's also great when she goes, so you gotta tell me how you did this. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool. Because now she's just like another person who's come in like, how the fuck are you doing this?
It's like, really fun. It's almost like a makeup ad in a way where she's like, what's your secret? Like,
yeah, it's like
it's so fun.
That's so much more interesting to me, and I love it. Like I love when a villain is coming in at a weird disadvantage, or like is not the person who's pulling all of the strings of everything in the world. They're just another character in the story who is trying to figure this shit out. I think it's great. I think it's great when you can, because I think in that moment you sort of associate yourself with Agatha because you're like, yeah, how did you do this? Like it's cool that she is someone who for basically half an episode, at least, you're in her shoes, like figuring out what's going on. I think that's cool.
For people like us, like we have the knowledge that Wanda is actually like ridiculously powerful and could easily do something like this. But 95% of the people that watch WandaVision aren't gonna know that, and so in that moment, you're right. You're just like, okay, so if you're doing all of this, how?
Yeah,
like,
and that's also so interesting because it's like seeing someone who hasn't seen it before, or even who hasn't been like engaging with like online at all the theories and stuff like that. Because I know people who haven't watched it before or who don't know any of the comic stuff, but we're still engaging with like Instagram and YouTube videos and stuff, and so they were getting the same kind of theories. I want to see someone's reaction to Agatha being revealed who has no idea who Agatha Harkness is.
Right.
Because I think it would work better.
I think it would.
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think?
I think it's I think even to a layman who's not getting on YouTube, is not doing anything like that, you would still be like, okay, there's definitely something up with Agnes. Like, there has to be something tied in beyond her just being a nosy neighbor, because everything about her is conspicuous. Even when she breaks the sitcom reality, it's really conspicuous. Yeah. But I do think the reveal would hit. Like, it would be like, aha, I knew there was something going on. For us, we were like, it comes from a mile away, and it's satisfying because I'm like, finally. But like,
and also again, banger. But I think that I think it would work better because then you're coming in with the same amount of information that Wanda has in that case, and I think that'd be cool. I wish I could like remove that from my brain and like watch it again with that.
Right.
But I also love, this is a really, really small thing, but it speaks to how fun Agatha is. When they're watching Wanda's childhood memory, which is beautiful and great. All of the flashback sequences are, but probably really especially, I think my favorite is the conversation with Vision.
I think that's by far the best one. They're all great, but that is,
but
it's a real effective scene.
But the stuff in the house with the parents and with Pietro is great. And there's something that like I really love about when Pietro is like running in and he's like, Mom, Dad, what's going on? And Agatha's just like, oh boy, he's pretty loud, isn't he? and then he's like, Wanda. And she's like, I mean, we're right here. Like, I just really like that. I think it's also poignant because you're feeling fondness for a Pietro that I don't think anyone gave a shit about in Age of Ultron.
Right,
like,
yeah.
But you're feeling like this fondness and like connection for him of like, oh man, you're like, yeah, it's Pietro. It's like, we didn't care about Pietro before.
I think you're feeling it by extension of, that Wanda obviously has a really deep affection for her brother.
And that's such an impressive thing to be able to pull off.
Because he really, and it's unfortunate because I think it's honestly, it was a big mistake that has since kind of been corrected in the way that they've been able to bring his death and give it a lot of weight and meaning. for Wanda's character. But I think it was a massive mistake to kill Quicksilver, because Quicksilver is a character with a rich history and lots of stories that you could tell. But I'm glad that death has not been in vain in terms of a storytelling sense.
And also, as we're talking about the flashbacks, we should probably mention the whole mutants thing. Here's my thing, and why I don't understand why people are mad about this. Because
it's a fandom thing. I think there's a thing in fandom right now, and like I think we can all be guilty of it to some extent.
Yeah.
But when you sit around, and obviously not in person right now, but you sit around with your 6 buddies, and you're like,
yeah.
well, what if X, Y, and Z? What if Al Pacino's playing Mephisto? And
okay, I am a little bit sad that we haven't seen that yet.
Hey, I'm still on the HMS Mephisto, and we're headed across the North Atlantic right now.
No, but you're right. It's a thing where you hype it up with your group and stuff, and you want it to be true. But I have 2 things for that. One is that it would be a terrible idea to introduce mutants this way, because if mutants are in any way a product of Wanda's magic, of any kind of magical act, then that completely kneecaps what mutants are. Like what
exactly.
They can't be an allegory for, coming out as being LGBTQ. They can't come out as being from a different race or ethnicity, because that would mean, yes, mutants are absolutely not naturally occurring. It is something that was done to people. Like,
it removes the entire the entire sentiment of prejudice.
It's why the Inhumans were never going to work as a substitute for mutants, because it's a process you have to go through. Thank God.
I mean, I think there's some Inhumans that are good characters for sure. But thank God they didn't sort of try to shove that in.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have worked.
And I think but my second thing is that they did sort of confirm mutants in this show.
I know. I was about to say they 100% sow seeds for mutants.
Yeah, because they say Wanda absolutely had magical powers before she touched the Mind Stone, which to me means Pietro must have also had something going on before the Mind Stone happened, because everyone else gets killed. I think it could go in either direction.
I was thinking about that. I think, like, with Wanda, it manifests in these really low, like, magical probability things of, like, making something that's very likely to happen, making it very unlikely to happen.
Baseline probability hex.
Right. With Pietro, I think when the dad, like, opens up the hole in the wall to get the Dick Van Dyke DVDs, there's, like, there's a box of Nikes. I'm like, maybe he was just a super athletic kid, and then when he got exposed,
you can see that in the little bit of screen time he has when he's like running around everywhere. And
so I think it does sow seeds for mutants for sure, but this was never about that.
You could also go the direction of he survived the connection with the Mind Stone because Wanda wanted him to survive.
Right.
But I think it's more fun if you're going that they had these mutant genes in them that were enhanced by,
I think it's for me, it's just frustrating. It's frustrating to see. And look, everyone is completely entitled to their own opinion. And if you didn't like the show, like, you're welcome to not like the show, But it's sad to me to see someone disliking the show because, oh my gosh, Reed Richards didn't show up. Oh my gosh, the X-Men aren't coming. Hugh Jackman didn't show up and kiss Ian McKellen in the face. Like,
well, I mean, I was deeply sad about that. Thank you very much. Opening that wound up again, that didn't happen.
Sorry, Brian. I knew that was special to you. This show was never ever going to be about any of those things. This show was about Wanda and Vision, and so we need to just abdicate. We can get excited and we can theorize, and that's amazing. I mean, that's literally what this show is, and what the show is going to be is us speculating. But we need to abdicate control and just say, like, there are other people telling these stories. Let them do that, and let's go along for the ride, because I'm sure what they're telling is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, I think that the Marvel guys have earned our trust in spades by this point. I think that they deserve to be able to tell the stories.
In Kevin Feige we trust.
Yeah, in Kevin Feige we trust. Let's talk a little bit about where we think this might be going. Let's enter the Breakers portion of the podcast.
Welcome to the Breakers portion of the podcast. So, regardless of what people on the internet are saying, this show totally introduces a ridiculous. I mean, it introduces so much stuff to play with in the future in terms of, and I think this House of M flavor that has been involved in WandaVision is not going away anytime soon. I think honestly, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is probably going to have a ton of House of M flavor in it, and I think you've got a lot to do with Vision as well moving forward.
Oh yeah, I think I have some initial thoughts about. I mean, there's some obvious things like, oh, actually, which did you think? Do you think, well, I think we both are gonna say the same thing. The first post-credit scene, with Monica getting called up by an old friend of her mother's, to help out with something. Yeah, I'm thinking that's Fury, and it's
definitely
the new sword,
yeah.
whatever he's building in space. Which will be interesting because I wonder who the director of that agency will be. Will it be Fury?
Yeah.
Will it be Monica? Will it be Brand?
I heard of a casting call for Secret Invasion that sounded like they were casting Abigail Brand.
I hope so. I like that character a lot.
It's a cool character, and I think it would be. Why not? Why? That's the thing. Yeah. Once they did Guardians of the Galaxy, they can do literally whatever they want now. They can do anything, you know.
Yeah.
I definitely think she's getting called up by Nick Fury and Talos, and that's going to be a direct tie into Secret Invasion and Captain Marvel 2. I think that's what that is. I honestly didn't find the scene to be super interesting, to be honest with you.
I'm excited about the thing that I'm excited about is this more space-based sword.
I agree. Yeah.
Because I really like Sword in the comics. I think it's got a lot of really interesting members. I think including Beast is a member of Sword a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. And Lockheed, the little purple dragon who we saw in New Mutants.
Yes,
who was
Lockheed,
the best part of New Mutants.
The only good part of New Mutants.
Did you know that Lockheed was a Sword agent? Because it's wild.
I didn't.
What his history is.
But I love that.
I'm gonna say very quickly. Lockheed was only ever on the X-Men as a spy for Sword.
That is amazing. I love that.
He became friends with the X-Men and with Kitty because he was an undercover spy for Sword.
and then he became a plushed animal. Then he became a plush toy for Anya Taylor-Joy.
Ooh, that rhymed. But I think there's a lot of really cool potential for Sword. I hope that Fury's not the director.
I don't think
Sword,
he will be.
Because I don't know that character. Yeah, because I think they're more interesting. I think Brand would be more interesting. I'd rather her than Monica because I think I like Monica having more free reign to like do stuff. Like I feel like it's harder to justify the director of Sword going on field missions and stuff.
I think you can make Monica an Avenger.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you shouldn't. And I mean, she knows she's friends with 2 Avengers or 1.5, whatever Spectral Vision knows of her. Mm-hmm. But I think that
right.
Fury. Well, I said Fury really weird there. Fury should. I think
that was weird.
I think that at this point in his life, he should have an understanding of like I ran S.H.I.E.L.D. It didn't work out very well. I think I need to step back and let someone else take the reins of this. I'm going to help build it, but then I'm going back to doing my sunglasses, hoodie, secret spy stuff going around the world or whatever.
Now, I do hope that we get to see some more Fury and Talos hanging out and having adventures, and I'm pretty sure that's what the Secret Invasion show is really mostly going to be. I agree. I'm really looking forward to exploring Sword in the cosmic light that Sword actually is. Like Sword in WandaVision essentially was
It's AIM almost.
Yeah, that's actually
like
much better.
It's basically just it's like a villainous science like building weapons agency at the point before Hayward gets fired and arrested.
It's definitely more like AIM than Guy Pearce's thing in Iron Man 3. So, which was supposed to be AIM.
Oh god, I forgot we already got an AIM. Oh, jeez.
It's hardly AIM.
Boy,
but
I like that movie.
I like it too.
I like that movie, but it's not even close to being AIM.
It's on its own page.
But let's talk about the probably the more interesting post-credit scene, the last one. Wanda, Scarlet Witch is at what looks like Wundagore Mountain, probably.
I was wondering if they're gonna do that. Yeah.
I think they'll kind of do it. I mean, they've set up that she was created to be a monster. I wonder if that'll. I would imagine that'll factor in to a Multiverse of Madness. But her hearing her kids and what does that mean? So their souls are alive somewhere, or and I also just think it's really cool that like Wanda's physical body is doing, going and getting the kettle and stuff, and her magical like astral projection form is studying up on all different kinds of magic at once.
She's doing the Doctor.
Really cool.
She's doing the Doctor Strange thing. He does this exact thing. He's sleeping in the first Doctor Strange movie, and then he's also reading books.
They do even say that she's more powerful than him.
Right,
Yes.
and I loved that. I loved that they called out just the phrase Sorcerer Supreme. They didn't have to actually have Benedict Cumberbatch drop down and give a cameo, I think, for it to tie into the future. So what do you think she's doing with the Darkhold? Do you think she's just researching up on herself? Do you think she's researching how can I get my kids back? I don't think she's doing that. I think she's just trying to figure out who I am,
I think she's trying to figure out what she is, why she's said to be the harbinger of the end of the world, like what her purpose is. And I think she's going to stumble across a method or where her kids might be if they're not dead. What's interesting to me is that I wonder if the kids' souls are alive somewhere. What about TV Vision?
Yeah.
I guess I could call him.
Yeah.
He didn't hear his voice. I feel like it would be really weird to bring him back now that we have a Vision again.
So here's my thought. My thought is that so Wanda brings Vision out of existence because she had a piece of the Mind Stone inside her, and she brought Vision into existence via that. With the kids, they just poof. She just suddenly became pregnant, And so maybe the choo-choo fucking Mephisto train, we're coming down. Maybe the Shards of Mephisto's soul thing is still going to be a thing, and he's going to be your main villain of Multiverse of Madness.
Maybe. And she did like give birth to them. Like it was like they didn't just like suddenly poof like her.
Right.
Like they're out of her. They're just around.
Right.
Like it's I don't know. I think there's a chance that the way that they were created within the Hex like gave them quote unquote souls that now exist somewhere.
Right. And they are human, whereas I mean, to me Vision is just as human as any of the human characters. But they are human, whereas Vision is a synthezoid,
And also they do, I mean, not to get into whatever the science of this is.
Right.
But like if you because she slept with Vision, got pregnant, kept accelerating the pregnancy, had the kids, they kept accelerating, but those kids, like if you like created a magic person, had sex with them, had kids, that magic person disappeared, the kids are still somewhere.
Yeah.
Like the kids are still the kid doesn't erase the kids. I don't know. Right. I have no idea how they're gonna reconcile it. But
I agree with you. I definitely agree with you. What I think is
because they are also disappearing when she like starts to get rid of the Hex. So I don't know.
Right. What I think is cool, and what I think is gonna be, this is my prediction. I think the kids will come back because they are still Wiccan and Speed. I don't think they're gonna do. I think it would be a little bit too convoluted to do the whole the Billy Kaplan, Tommy Wallace thing where the souls of the Maximoff twins go into separate kids. I think that's just a little
so much stuff.
It's so much to happen, and it's just not compelling, really. No. What I think is going to happen is that Multiverse of Madness will end with the boys being able to exist outside of something magical created by her. And I think what you're going to see is a sort of Harry Potter scenario where you have these two really talented child actors that are going to grow up on screen through the Marvel movies and become young Avengers. And
they are setting that up across the board,
right?
Like with the new Hawkeye and with
Miss Marvel.
Cassie Lang's an interesting situation because she's a little bit older, but I think that
Spider-Man
overall
too.
They're very clearly setting up the Young Avengers.
Right. They have America Chavez. They have Miss Marvel. You have Spider-Man, Kate Bishop, Riri Williams. Yeah, You know, here's an interesting thought. So White Vision, we can get into that. White Vision goes off and he's like, I guess I'm just gonna dip and kind of figure out who I am, now that I have all my memories. I think it'd be really interesting is if you're building the new Avengers team or you're building the Young Avengers team and you have Vision come in and spearhead the Young Avengers.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it's also I think the really interesting thing here is going to be once Billy and Tommy are back, their father doesn't know them.
Right. Yeah. And while he
he does know Wanda and loves Wanda.
Now, do you think he is going to have the memories but be emotionless, or do you think he's going to have the memories and evolve to basically be the Vision that we knew before?
I think that it's implied once he unlocks his memories that he gets emotions back, because he does the same head kind of tilt that Vision does. He gets human eyes.
Yeah.
I think he's a feeling being now.
I agree. Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I honestly think it would be a mistake to move forward with that character and have him be emotionless, because I think what this show has shown is that Paul Bettany as this character, as a human, relatable character, is just, it's gold. I don't think necessarily that Wanda and Vision will necessarily get back in a relationship.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, it's definitely possible because they have incredible chemistry, but I don't necessarily see that for the foreseeable future.
I think that if there's a season 2 of WandaVision, I think it will be flipping the, like, who's quote unquote who's in control thing, and I think it will be primarily following Spectral Vision, like, going on a journey of self-discovery, trying to reconnect with Wanda or not being able to reconnect with Wanda, trying to find wherever Wanda's left at the end of Multiverse of Madness. I think that's a lot of material for a really strong season 2, which I hope happens at some point, because I just think this creative team is so great, and this, like, specific group of characters is so cool.
Right. I really want to see Jack.
I want to see more of it.
I want to see Jack Schaefer write more MCU stuff in general. She wrote Black Widow, which makes me, I mean, like, Black Widow.
Great.
Black Widow is, I'm sure it's going to be a cool movie, but it makes me much more excited about it knowing that Jack Schaefer wrote it. So that's really cool.
No, for sure.
One more. Agatha. We leave Agatha in a very interesting place. And I
did want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we've got this thing that she has the potential to kind of be like a Loki character moving forward, where she kind of just pops in and out all the time. Right now, it's my assumption that she's totally depowered and she can't really do any witchy things, but she still has the knowledge. Right. And I think we do hint at the fact that, like, Wanda's going to need mentorship, and whether that, that can come from Stephen Strange, but it more effectively feels like it could come from Agatha.
And it's, well, for one thing, she is a witch. Like, there is a rift there where that's not what Strange is or what he was taught to be. I do think two things about her having her mind kind of wiped and swapped to Agnes. I think, one, based on her eyes, she is in horrible pain and incredibly aware of what's happening.
Right. And
I feel very that whole time.
I feel very conflicted about what that means for Wanda morally.
So do I.
Yeah.
And I also think Wanda saying, I'll see you again, and her going, not if I see you first, is like her using sitcom tropes to manage to get a threat out. Yeah. But I think I have mixed feelings about Wanda choosing to do that to Agatha.
I do too, yeah.
Because I do think it's excessively cruel. I also think it might undercut the lesson a bit if she realizes that what she was doing is wrong and then immediately does it to someone again. I know she's now using it as a weapon and not as, like, thinking that it's the right thing to do.
Right.
But it's not a thing a hero does. Like, mind wiping someone and sticking them in a town to not even mind wiping them, because she knows that this person is in horrible, it's torture. But I think we're going to expand on that. I don't think Wanda's going to be a clear-cut hero all the time. Because even just the way she leaves, you can tell. Like, you can see it in her that she's got some edge to her.
And she's also, like, I think there's a lot of conflict in her as well. And I don't think Agatha's going to be in that position very long. I think we're going to I was a little nervous at the beginning of this episode of, like, oh, they really made Agatha Harkness a full-out villain. But then they left her off on the page of how she is in the comics, which is, like, kind of a shitty person, but, like, she'll babysit your kids, like, you know.
She didn't even have a plan of what she was gonna do with the power when she had it. She just wanted it.
Yeah,
She was like, I'll figure out something to do with this.
Right,
Like,
right, for sure.
It's pretty cool.
For sure.
But I think I'm really excited and I can see it so clearly in my mind. This scene where some villain in the future walks, or a hero, walks down this nondescript street, turns a corner up this road to this boring, standard suburban house, and then knocks on a door, open up, and it's Agatha. I'm so excited for that to happen at some point in the future. We need a villain team up, and I like that they're not killing all their villains anymore.
Thank God. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
Like, there are villains from earlier on in the MCU that would be dope to have now, but we don't.
It's a shame they're not around. But I think all the most fun ones are alive.
I really would like to have Ultron back. That's like the one I want back the most, because I think James Spader's performance is dope as shit. And I think
we've seen in Homecoming that there's still Ultron tech.
There's Ultron
that could be,
tech,
like, operated,
and the eyes were still glowing red. So what does that say?
Like, yeah.
What does that say?
It says more multicolored lasers. That's what I say.
All right, so this is going to wrap us up for the very first inaugural episode of Comic Breakers. Thank you for joining us. Please be sure to write.
Be sure to write us.
Be sure to write.
Write us a letter.
Please, I'm so lonely. I have no one.
Send it by Raven.
Please be sure to like, rate, and subscribe. Give us a comment. Turn that notification bell on. Anything that the regular YouTubers say, do it. Please, it helps so much. But thank you for being here, and we cannot wait to go on this journey with y'all.
To break all the comics in the world, they're all going to be broken. No more comics.
No more comics.
We're getting rid of all of them. No more comics.
We are full circle, boy. House of M, no more comics.